Efficient PPC management is the key to maximising your return on investment. And PPC is the lifeblood of so many businesses. But if you're paying for the clicks to your website, whether it be 100, 1,000 or £100,000, there's a lot you need to do to make sure you're making the most of that spend. The last thing you want to do is spend all that money and have it not convert very well. And there's a bit that a lot of people don't think of in that cloud and engineering behind the website all play a very pivotal role in your PPC performance. There's a whole lot of challenges you can run into, which can cause all sorts of problems for your PPC, such as site downtime, so the site being offline so nobody can actually get through to the site once they click on your ad. So essentially that PPC spend is just wasted. And even if they do get through to your site, if you've got a problem with the form that's not being detected because the site's online, but the form's not working, so therefore none of the e-commerce sales or the lead gen from your form activities, none of those leads are getting through to your backend database. And I've got a bit of a story here from a company I knew years ago who had a bit of a problem with their PPC one bank holiday weekend, and the form wasn't collecting leads. So nearly 4 days later, they realised that the site, although it was up, hadn't been collecting any leads from all their marketing activities, and essentially they'd wasted like 100,000 in PPC spend over the course of one weekend. So not collecting leads is one challenge. Another challenge is around the actual performance of your cloud estate and the landing pages themselves. So things like your web vitals, so your page speed. But the key thing is how quickly can they actually get through and start interacting with the various elements on the page? How quickly can they fill out the form? How long until those elements load and they can start kind of playing with them? And this is even more important at the marketing agency level, where you're doing this at scale across many clients. And if you have consistent elements running across those various landing pages, then if there is a problem with it and you're not detecting it, then it can run up a big bill very quickly. And there are bits you can do around sort of things like A/B testing, so changing the color of a button or changing some text so that you see what performs best, and doing a proper UX design to really get it looking nice and working well and functioning the way that users expect. But no amount of arty loveliness is going to make a difference if your forms are broken and you're not actually collecting any leads. And there's a few of us here at Firney with digital marketing backgrounds, so we understand the impact of this, and we've done it in the past on very many brands. But what I really want to talk about is how you can get the right foundations in cloud, which is something so many small businesses miss, but the big performers really understand and they're taking advantage of. But it's so important because it can massively increase your conversion rate, but also massively reduce your risk of sending traffic through to a site that's not working. So there's a few ways that cloud can help. The first is around scalability, reliability, and efficiency of your cloud platform. So these are things like how well does the solution scale when an ad performs particularly well. So say you're doing PPC or even influencer marketing, you suddenly get a whole load of traffic through to your website, or you're running a social campaign and you get a whole load of traffic. How does your website respond to that? Is it able to scale effectively? Because you reach a point where one server is not enough to handle all the traffic that's coming through from one successful campaign. And so having the right solutions in place to deal with that sudden need to scale the servers and be able to cater for all that traffic is very important. So this is where things like Kubernetes or serverless, where you can essentially make use of solutions that auto scale for you, they respond to that traffic. So depending on how much processing is being done or how large a hub sub queue size is, you can set up rules to respond to that and spin up new instances of your site so that the traffic's kind of being shared amongst many, many nodes. So head on over to firney.com/review if you want to get a free cloud review of your cloud estate, and we can kind of talk through the options in terms of scalability, reliability, monitoring, cost optimization, and security as well. The next point is obviously uptime reliability. The standard uptime reliability, so what happens if a node should fail? Do you have self-healing in place for the infrastructure so that you're not still paying for PPC traffic that's going through to a site that's fallen over because a hard disk failed or something like that in the background? So this is where clouds are very good at this, because you can have self-healing nodes in the background being automatically replaced, but you need to have the infrastructure in front of that to be able to take advantage of that. If you're running your own VMs, that might not necessarily happen for you, so you need to make sure that your cloud provider and your tooling and the setup of your site is correct to make use of those advantages. And you want to be tracking those uptime statistics and making sure that you know what your usual amount of leads or sales that you're getting to your website is, and you're monitoring that, because if there's a sudden difference, that's basically your first indicator that something's really wrong and you need to go and fix it. So you can set up a monitor basically on your database or your CRM, just basically checking how many leads or sales did we get through in the last hour and how does that compare to what we expected to receive in the last hour. And you can look at a percentile score of that to see kind of how well it's performing against what you expected, and send out alerts to the team if there's a sudden decrease in that activity. You should also be monitoring metrics such as page speed as well, and this is for the real user page speed. You want to be thinking, how is this actually performing for my customers, and how has it been performing in the last hour? We had one publishing customer that massively improved their conversion rate by sort of 3 times by focusing on things like page speed. It can make a massive difference, especially on mobile where the bandwidth isn't as great because you're using like 3G or 4G or public Wi-Fi, which isn't always great. The next thing is around security and compliance. Now, I'll be putting out a post on this later next week, I think. But essentially, these are things like you're doing your automated checks to make sure you've got all your plugins in place, making sure you've got your web application firewall. You also want to make sure that, obviously, with the cloud, you can get a whole load of benefits by choosing the right provider, because many of them have already attained certain compliance levels in terms of security. You want to check those certifications and make sure that they are compliant and they are secure. And it's things like making sure that only the right people can access those data centers and they've got the right security procedures in place to be able to administer who gets into the buildings and that sort of thing. An unusual advantage you might get from cloud, if you're thinking about things like cost optimization, you can focus on optimizing your engineering so that it's running a more cost-efficient architecture. We had one customer that was spending something like 30% of their revenue on their cloud bill, which is huge. There's a few very simple optimizations you can make to basically consolidate items, to maybe run multiple VMs on one larger server, or make use of Kubernetes infrastructure, which may improve your time to market and your ability to deploy changes more frequently, and therefore make cost optimizations through the team and how efficiently they're able to work with the solution. Now, there's a few other cloud benefits you might want to think about taking advantage of when you're reassessing your cloud infrastructure, or even taking your first steps into the cloud. So these are things like collaboration, for instance. Now, a lot of PPC campaigns are based on data to build audiences so that you can target the right people at the right time with the right message. And a lot of these activities are being based on things like Google Analytics. That data is being processed. There are machine learning models that teams are working on, and they're building out those audiences in a cloud platform such as Google, quite often Google Analytics. And the team, meanwhile, is working on a completely separate architecture, a different cloud provider, because they prefer the tool set on that cloud platform. Now, a lot of these cloud platforms are very comparable in the solutions that they offer. You might want to think about consolidating those onto one platform. The good thing to do is base your systems around your data so that all of your systems can take advantage of all the data you're collecting and working on, and all the machine learning models that you're building so that you can deploy those at scale. Another benefit you might not have thought about is green hosting. Now, various cloud providers have their own targets they've declared or they're hitting. So Google Cloud, their sort of net zero target is to be running on carbon-free energy 24/7 across all of their data centers by 2030. Microsoft Azure, so think about Microsoft itself, is aiming to be carbon negative by 2030, so not just Azure, but the entire Microsoft, so think about like Office and all the other pieces. AWS wants net zero carbon emissions by 2040. This would probably go a long way to helping a lot of web-based businesses become carbon neutral as well, which is obviously going to be very appealing to a lot of customers. One of the other benefits is the AI and machine learning side of it, being able to make use of services to run your POC, such as Vertex AI on the Google Cloud Platform, or using a tool such as Kubernetes for long-term machine learning development, so we can set up these machine learning solutions on top of Kubernetes so you can make the best use of the architecture and have very predictable pricing in terms of how much you're going to spend, regardless of how many queries are made. As I already mentioned, using those machine learning tools in your audience segmentation and building out better copy and better imagery, doing that testing of multivariate ads, it can go a long way with helping with your conversion rate optimization by getting more people through clicking on your ads. If you'd like a review of your cloud architecture, head on over to firney.com/review, and we'll run a review that will give you a better idea of the next steps you should be taking around cloud, and obviously some strategies to get started with that. So that's it for today. We're going to be making a whole load more content on cloud for marketing. So if that was useful to you, let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.